Welcome to the Esports Central Podcast. I am axtremes, and you're watching episode number 45, which is a big number. And, well, it's been about 45 minutes since we started trying to record this episode, but we just have so much damn fun. Especially without Glenn around, right, Kaameel?
Oh, G Flake, yeah. It's going to be a great podcast. I have nobody to argue with. I can just be happy, PMA. You know, don't have to want to shoot myself halfway through the podcast. It's all good things.
So is Glenn like the Puff Daddy of South African esports, where he just keeps changing his name so that people don't forget about it?
We keep changing his name.
Yeah, I have to take some responsibility for all the nicknames Glenn's had. Glon, Glot. What is the other one recently?
Well, there's that one that he was named in an official communique where he was named Glenn K, which is...
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I've enjoyed that one. I actually phoned him earlier and called him Glenn K, so, you know... We'll go with that. Meanwhile, Profeci fresh from a refreshing nap. Are you refreshed? Are you ready to go? Are the punches going to fly, Prof?
I don't know what the term refreshed even is supposed to mean in the context of a human being, but yeah, 100% I guess.
Basically, if you were to die and then have yourself cremated and then remade from some sort of DNA strand, then you'd be refreshed, right? And you had your memories loaded into it. This is what altered
Would
carbon.
you not remember the pain of going through death, though?
Not if your memory backup was prior to death, so you could die away and not remember it.
I think
This
it's easier.
isn't altered.
This
This isn't
in Dota,
altered
you know.
carbon.
Yeah, that show was really entertaining, except for the lead actor who was literally like a wooden plank with a voice.
I didn't mind the lead actor so much. I felt that the old version of him, like, you know, like the 200 years ago version of him was pretty.
Yeah, he was way better. So talking about planks with a voice, we don't have Glenn, thankfully. So Nadia, you just thought I was about to wreck you, didn't you?
I did. I was like, where are you going with this?
Glenn's not here to defend himself. We got a bag on Glenn. That's how it works, right?
G Flake.
So how much wine have you had? Just as a
The rest went into the pasta. But also,
How much wine have you had? Yes.
yes.
I was busy like doing an internal yawn. If anybody would want to go back and look for that part where he was saying, I didn't mind the lead actor. I was going like... and afterwards I'm like, yeah, I nailed that.
Nailed it. Just it didn't come through on camera.
Didn't at all.
So what's interesting about this podcast, aside from the esports, the flames, the making fun of each other, the wrecking people, is that actually a lot more people listen to it than watch it. So if you've always listened to it, do head over to YouTube, go to the Esports Central channel or my channel, axtremes, and you can watch it if you like, see what we're all about. But of course, it is available on iTunes, on Podbean, on Spotify. I think it's on Anchor now as well. So it's all over the place. And it's, of course, at www.esportscentral.co.za. And we're going to talk about some international esports things first. And, we'll start with StGutterlily, actually, because we always leave the best for last. Now we'll start with dessert.
Goodness. So I think last week you maybe just touched on it, Mr. Nate Nantzer, who left Blizzard for Riot.
Yes.
And, of course, all the little news going around again, dead game.
That's true, right? I mean, Overwatch dead game.
Who knows? Takes me a couple of seconds to still get a game, so until I'm waiting for like 10 minutes like the Grandmasters, I guess I'll still think it's okay. So during the week, more people seem to be leaving Activision Blizzard. They're blaming it on like employment morale for some reason at this point, with people apparently not being happy with how the game is being treated, because it's focusing on commercializing like esports, like the Call of Duty and obviously Overwatch, and people are not actually happy with what's happening with the game, which seems to be, I don't know. I have such low standards apparently when it comes to these things. I feel bad for saying it.
I'm so confused.
We were just talking about drinking copious amounts of wine, putting it in your food. Now you're talking about low standards. What is this podcast about?
What has it come to? No, but obviously, I don't know if even it is such a big thing, the fact that Nate has left Activision Blizzard. It could just be, okay, I've done one thing, I've gotten it to a certain point where I want to get it. Now I'm being offered a boatload of money to go and work for.
I think that's exactly it. To go to
Right,
Epic
yeah.
Games.
And I can just go and do what I do for them and the same manner. And I mean, I guess the next couple of years, somebody else comes along and boom, off again. Personally, I don't think you can say that him leaving necessarily is such a big hit for Blizzard. Everybody can be replaced. And he's also I remember Richard Lewis also did another article on him, and actually look at what he does. He isn't that hands-on at the end of the day with what comes out, I almost want to say.
So was his title, was it League Commissioner, was it?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah.
He's the league commissioner. Like, officially, he was something basically like the primary marketer of the Overwatch League. Like, he would do most of the sales to the various people involved in the situation.
And I think he used to actually work for Fox. So that is what he does. He's
Well,
not necessarily
Fox, but in the sense he was like one of the online web content guys. So it's
Oh, is
like,
it?
how high level are you really? You know,
I'm not
in that
really
sense.
sure. But ultimately, so how he's gone, and what I've basically just said was where people are not happy with the fact that it's not focusing on building a game for a community, and it's just driving this massive commercialized sport. We've all got our complaints about how OWL is being made, and a lot of people would say the propaganda around OWL. And more people are leaving. Like I said, maybe at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You just get someone, new cog in the wheel. But it doesn't, like, for a company that is like showing these record, we don't know. What do you call it? Words.
Well, they're just winning,
Sorry,
folks. They're just winning.
Record revenue.
Yeah, that's the word, revenue. It doesn't seem to bode well that they're losing so much of their staff. I mean, at the end of the day, that's also a big a part of your company, what you produce, what comes out of it. And I feel like having masses flow out.
It's not good for public perception. Let me actually bring up the article just here so guys can see it. It's on the Deserto website. And the title, sources more high-profile Blizzard staff set to leave amid morale problems. And you can see one of the people they're mentioning is Kim Fan, who's been with the company for 13 years, one of the sort of front-facing people in Blizzard Esports, basically. So that's again, like, not a great sort of look for the company, you wouldn't think. They mentioned in the article Nanza as well.
Yeah. I actually forgot about the Pete Flastel. I don't even know how that sounds like a swear word in Latin.
Vlastelica.
Vlastelica. Or a good wine. Anyway.
Or a cathedral.
Getting deep here. But yeah, so he's the guy who basically just did the there's my mind. Am I drunk? No, I'm not. Okay, I'm just he's the one who worked for Fox. I actually forgot.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought my mind was like, But I was just rolling with it, hoping that eventually the two roads will come together. And yet they never did.
So, yeah, looking at the story overall, it's not saying that it has happened. It's just saying that it's about to happen. And so far, Richard Lewis's reporting has been pretty on point at every stage. I mean, he's the guy who released the rule book for the tournament prior to it still hasn't been released officially by Overwatch League, which is kind of funny because one of the things that they were saying at the start of the whole thing was, we're going to be like the NBA or the NFL, and there'll be a player union, and the rules will be out, and like all of these things which have never happened. Never happened. So it's just Richard Lewis's reporting, as much as people hate what he says about Overwatch, and I'm pretty sure he really dislikes Overwatch. I'll definitely agree with that. But his reporting's been pretty fair on the whole thing overall. So I think it's probably trustworthy. At the time of recording, this report was from 2 days ago. So maybe by the time the podcast is out, we'll actually have some clarity on that. But if some of those high-profile people are gone, you lose Nate Nanza, who's the public-facing guy, and you lose two more public-facing figureheads that people sort of associate with Overwatch League and Blizzard. So, is that going to make the investors maybe scurry for the hills? Apparently not when it came to Robert Kraft's getting trapped for basically employing prostitution in an establishment that dealt in human trafficking. So that wasn't worth talking about. So I don't know if this will be.
I don't like. All I can think of is like somebody maybe like Nate. I can still understand because he's the person. He is the face that brings in those investors. But for everybody else, I kind of feel like Activision Blizzard is a massive company. They're supposedly a very rich company.
Not as rich as Epic, apparently.
Not as rich as Epic, but money buys things and money buys people. So might be this. It looks bad. More people join. More people. I think if you basically this first wave of people leave and then some other people come in, same situation over and over until Overwatch just runs dead, then maybe yes. Then we should be concerned.
I think for the actual operations, like Prof was saying, he never really had too much to do with operations, and most of these people are high enough up the chain that they're probably not actually making the day-to-day happen, which means nothing will essentially change on that side. But investor perception, we know it's like, somebody farts in Turkey and our local currency goes down because, emerging market sentiment smells bad right now. So it's just, that's how sentiment works. It's just like something that's not related or isn't even really that much of an issue. But if it looks a certain way in public, it can affect the way the money people view you. So, and
but
I think everything is built on the money people in Overwatch League.
But it's also got me kind of like thinking about, I couldn't give a rat's ass about Fortnite. It's not something I enjoy at all, but it does make it interesting to see what changes are going to happen with that, because the way that they've been running their comps up until now has been massive prize pools, not much else. So to see that in Rocket League, where it's going to go,
exciting.
Maybe under him, is going to be really exciting. Not for me to watch, but I mean, exciting to see for the business.
So headlines forthcoming. Toyota jump ship from Overwatch League to Rocket League. You can drive a Camry in Rocket League now with rocket boosters strapped to the back of it. Official drink of Fortnite is Coke Zero.
That'd be wild. But I think the big issue with this is that, like the Soda article explains, like the reason that Kim fan KB, where did I even get that?
I don't even know. It's like half of your brain's missing. Glenn's not here.
Yeah, I did call him a double damage during the one time. I moan when he's not here. I moan when he is here. I'm just never happy. We just like that bad couple that refuses to break up at this point. But Kim's point here is like the reason she doesn't want to be there is like bad morale and like feels like their voices aren't heard on the esports side of things. It's like, oh, we're getting Coca-Cola deals and shit, so we're happy. But like the game itself is a bit shit and nobody's actually dealing with that. And I know like all gamers always complain, like, Dota guys complain, new patch please, and that kind of stuff. But even though people moan, like you would never say Dota is not in the right hands in terms of game development with IceFrog, right? So I think Overwatch, the game itself, I always say is like the integrity of the game, like good enough to sustain all the shit that Blizzard are trying to do with it. And I've always erred on the side of no. And now if your salesman and your Toyota sponsor guys are leaving, that creates a lot of worrying things for me.
It's just not a good look. And especially because it's like they've constantly crowed about how good Overwatch looks and, look at this investment and look at that investment. And now it's like, why is your primary mover and shaker like leaving at this point? It's just too much stuff. It just doesn't make sense.
And again, we talk about this because it has potential ramifications for the rest of esports, despite what Glenn says, but he's not here, so he can't defend himself.
Usually Glenn disagree on a lot of things, but on that, but we just argue, even though we kind of agree. But that thing, I really disagreed with him.
But now, this is the thing. No one else really follows Al's example. Okay, so they're going to create their own like Counter-Strike, Call of Duty league, and it's going to be the same, but it's still under them. That's why I'm kind of interested to see what's going to happen with Fortnite and with Rocket League, because is it going to try and emulate what they've had, or is it going to go a different route? Because I think that's going to be a clue as to how well Overwatch League is actually working out. Commercially, I think it looks very shiny, it looks very well done, but that proof might just be in the putting it in a different company. If they can be like, well, don't do that. I will get you sponsors, but don't do that.
That's actually a really good point. If they try to do the same thing, then it tells you, hey, Nate Nanza's actually died in the wool. He wants exactly this sort of model. This is what he thinks works. And if they don't go that way, I think they can go that way with something like Rocket League because of the format of the game. Maybe Fortnite could be a bit difficult because, again, it's not a team of 5 or 6 people. So that may stop that from happening. But overall, I guess there's a lot of questions yet to be answered. Apparently, he would have started there, I think, last week. So it's probably take a while before we see anything meaningful. So it's probably something we'll come back to in the coming weeks or months as we see things develop. But certainly interesting. And one thing I do want to say about Call of Duty World League is good luck on making a franchise league with city-based franchises in a game where a new version comes out every year. That just seems like it's freaking
honestly,
crazy.
Try and explain it to the people that are wanting to buy in, like the owners. Like, oh, so this year we're gonna have an entirely different game. This one's in the future. Why though?
Like tell those same people who own like an NFL franchise or an NBA franchise, like, listen, dude, we've been playing NBA for 120 years or whatever, but this year we're throwing it out for this next thing with rocket boots on. It's like,
see, that's the thing.
Jetpack basketball.
To build an esport, like maybe Dota is it's a good example of an esport that should end up having a very long lifespan, because essentially, even though patches and all of that make a difference, it's the same game. And I think a lot of these shooters are going to probably won't outlast those kind of games.
I think shooters, it depends on the shooter. Like, the thing is, a shooter in and of itself is going to change much less than Dota. It's got less moving parts.
But how it looks and who plays it.
Yeah,
That's
like,
what I mean.
yeah, in that respect, maybe. But like, I think it's easier to make multiple different shooters, which means that it's much easier to sort of, it's much harder to stand out. Whereas with something like Dota, it's fairly unique in the way it's going to look. I mean, you got League of Legends, but there aren't many others that that look exactly the same as them.
But with regards to Overwatch, by the way, Overwatch League is back this Thursday, which is going to be the same day that this podcast comes out. So see what happens there as well.
I actually want to jump back on that little strand that you were on there, because I liked where you were going with this unknowingly. The lifespan of something like a competitive shooter, or just how popular can it be, how long will it last. We spoke last week about Apex Legends, which was interesting to me because we were talking about how it had this huge launch and everybody was talking about it, everybody was playing it, and then it's sort of died down. I mean, there's still millions of players, but it's not anything like it was when it launched. And we spoke about Battalion 1944, and I was reading an article on DeSoto today, actually, where now Dr. Disrespect is playing it, and Shroud is playing it, and like all these big streamers are playing it. Now it's doing the same thing as Apex Legends did, even though this is a game that actually was on early access a year ago. So, I mean, to me, it almost feels like now where we're at, the currency of how popular your game is going to be at launch is which streamers play it. And it's really it's Dr. Disrespect, Shroud, some
Ninja,
Lex maybe. Sorry, what did you say?
Think about
Ninja.
Ninja, yeah.
Ninja.
A couple of months ago, there was the whole, everybody started playing GTA 5 again.
Yeah, the role-playing thing. Summit as well as the other one.
Yeah, and it was massive. And then suddenly all the streamers hop on it, and it just blows up again.
Hey, I was doing that in 2015. I tried to spend an entire hour in GTA without actually doing anything illegal, and it was quite relaxing. I role-played as a normal person.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
I got griefed for like an hour kept Spawn getting run over. Spawn, get run over. I'm like, I'm gonna
Yeah,
jump in the ocean.
I used to play a lot of GTA Online, and all I did was grief people. Like Shaun's played Counter-Strike with me, so he knows that my capacity for being toxic in a game is quite scary for somebody who seems as nice as I do. But I don't know. In that, I used to play with a mate of mine, and all we would do was just literally grief people for like 3 or 4 hours until they'd rage quit. It was terrible.
That is toxic. All right. So Slasher made a good tweet relevant to our discussion, right? Or a Slasher for our podcast name that I've given him. 700,000 viewers for the return of Keemstar's Friday Fortnite across Twitch and YouTube streams with as much or more excitement from people than the epic $1 million World Cup qualifiers. The second tweet was nearly 1 million viewers. Tournaments like Keemstar's Friday Fortnite played in online with pros, streamers, celebs brings huge numbers and exposure to esports. They're also often more entertaining than traditional esports, and would like to see this format in more games. So I maybe botched up reading out that tweet there because it didn't make sense as I read it now out loud. But basically what he's saying is also another tweet he made, or somebody made previously, I don't remember who, and it's like saying it's actually more worth it to give a streamer like Shroud or something some money to go play your game, and you get more publicity from your game through that than hosting like an ESL tournament, for example. And I think it's fairly true.
I mean,
Probably.
the thing is, you're dealing with one person, not a whole corporation.
But I think viewership-wise, like a guy like Ninja or Shroud literally competes with like big events. Like would have more than the ESL Dota in Birmingham last week. It's like crazy to think about.
Yeah.
You were going to say something, Nadia?
No. It was unrelated. I almost want to say. In that sense, isn't it when they play it, it's almost not an esport.
No, it is absolutely isn't.
It's just entertainment watching somebody play a game. So I don't know. Is there a mindset change that we need to bring in to think like what an esport is? Because obviously the only way we ever frame it is that it's like a traditional sport, like you versus you playing it, and that's obviously not how companies see it. For them, it's just revenue.
I think companies
now
don't
that I've
see the
remembered
difference.
that word, the whole time.
But I don't think companies in general, like who aren't endemic esports companies or gaming companies, see the difference between esports and gaming and streaming. And to them, it's all the same thing. It's probably the same marketing budget. If you're going to spend it on Ninja, you could spend it on a tournament, you could spend it on whatever. You're just going to spend it on whatever is gaming related that the kids like, and you'll get the return on. And certainly streamers probably are the best return, the top guys. But I mean, some sponsors would be in it, I think, because there's somebody there who has maybe a love for the esport in question or whatever. But generally, it's going to be where the money is. So, yeah, esports probably in some ways may go through a tough time or two with some of the stuff coming up. I don't know. We'll have to see. But
I actually kind of wonder though how much of people who watch a streamer would necessarily play the game that the streamer is playing. How much does this actually translate?
I think it translates well if you look at Apex Legends launch.
I mean, it also depends on like what kind of game it is. Like the thing with these streamers is that they're essentially like a marketing function, which is largely what esports has been for so long.
It is what it is, yeah.
Is that like if you can find the cash to drop the money for a like a day one release, and then have like all the big streamers talking about it, I think that's pretty solid. I mean,
but
that
then
definitely
it dies a week later because nobody really cares.
Apex Legends really fucked up on an unrelated note is that they didn't have a battle pass when they released the game. If they had a battle pass for that weekend when they had that 50 million players, they would have made so much money. Like, how did they not have a battle pass in like 2K18 releasing the game? I have no idea.
My theory on Respawn Entertainment is that they try to make really good games and don't worry about the rest of it. So like all of their games so far, except for Apex, have been huge commercial failures. So, but really solid games. So
that's fair.
Release a solid game again, right? Titanfall were all commercial failures in terms of what they were looking for, because EA was essentially, they hired those people who were ex-Titanfall people, in fact, ex-Call of Duty people, including Vince Zampello, who was one of the guys who started Call of Duty, and he was also in Medal of Honor before that, which, by the way, one of the greatest games ever, Medal of Honor Allied Assault. Shout out to the Normandy beach landing bit.
That's like 5 different games have that.
Yeah, but they all copied Allied Assault. Just saying. The OG. But we're talking about people who came from Call of Duty, and EA basically wanted them to make something that could compete with Call of Duty, and they made a really good game twice. The second one particularly super good, but they didn't make the money that anywhere near what Call of Duty was doing. So clearly didn't work, and now they come out with Apex Legends, which is essentially Titanfall 2 with like a lot of changes in Battle Royale. Super solid game, but the commercial side of it doesn't seem well thought out, as you said. I agree with you on that. They could have done that better.
Yeah, I feel like you get those developers with the Nate Nanza to sell the shit. Man, that's like a golden recipe right there.
Yep, pretty soon everybody's going to be playing Rocket League again, right? Brad will be playing Rocket League because they'll like put guns on the side of the cars. I don't know, but
you drive a Tesla.
Oh, there we go, marketing opportunity. Elon, you can have an Elon hat, and
then South Africans can tweet Elon Musk to retweet their Rocket League teams again or some shit.
Elon, God, we need to send our team to North Korea for the World Championship. Can you like sponsor us? Elon, help us. Honestly, I'm sorry, this sounds horrible to say, but everybody in South African esports that freaking tweets at Elon Musk asking him for money to send their team somewhere or some shit like that. Fuck off.
Hasn't he like officially said that he doesn't actually care for South Africa?
Yeah, he has.
Forget that, dude. If, let's say some guy is like, listen here, Elon Musk, tweet him, I have a new battery for your fucking Tesla cars. Maybe that's like something he would maybe 0.5% of 1% care about. But like, who's gonna care about your fucking shitty ass Fortnite stream? Like, come on, dude. Even your mom doesn't care about that.
Yeah.
There was that one bit where he asked, there's that American singer, and she's really weird, and I once saw a video of her killing a chicken in her closet.
What? What?
I can't remember her name, but Google it.
I'm Googling it right now.
She sells butt soap. Anyways, so Elon Musk got her to bless something to like take away evil spirits. So if you are in the evil spirit banning business, maybe like a Sangoma, Dr. Jack, whoever advertises on the side of the road, maybe then Elon will give you the side of the time of the day. If you are, however, Bravado Gaming, you'll get a flat ignore. That was sad.
Jeez, I don't even know where that was going. But... So the name of the singer is Azealia Banks. Azealia Banks?
Azealia Banks. Yes, that bitch. She crazy.
Yeah, very crazy. 2016. Think of all the chickens that have died since then, and also think of what's in your KFC.
Damn.
Anyway, we'll move on. We'll move on from this one. We've digressed at great length. Okay, so keeping on the subject of Richard Lewis, which, I mean, we all like talking about Richard Lewis for some reason. Some people love to hate him. Some people just hate him, and then there's those of us that actually really respect his work. And I guess it's a good thing what we're about to talk about, yeah, which is that he had some news to share yesterday, and one part of it is that he'd left the World Series of Esports, WSOE. He was one of the senior people there. And while he was doing that, he was actually sort of semi-retired from investigative journalism, yet somehow kept breaking the biggest stories in esports nonetheless. So he's actually going back to it. He says, esports is at a critical time, and I need to get back in the trenches and do what I do best. More news to follow. And I think that one is probably pretty scary for some of the people who are doing shady shit right now, because this is an investigative journalist who seems to have balls the size of Saturn, literally, because...
Access.
He's just unafraid to release the big stories. I mean, he's just broken a lot of big, important, exciting things, and has mostly received a lot of hate for it, which is one of the reasons why he ended up leaving E-League. Was a host of E-League on Turner Broadcasting Network, National American TV, and ended up leaving the whole thing because he was still doing the investigative reporting, receiving a lot of hate for what he was doing at times, and went to World Series of Esports for a year now, and they put on some really cool events, I gotta say. But he hasn't been really that active, despite releasing a lot of big things, like I mentioned, the Echo Fox piece. So it'll be interesting to see just how ham he goes here, Shaun, because I mean, he still hasn't seemed to pull any punches lately. He's still putting out stuff. How much more is it going to escalate?
Like a lot of the stuff that he's been releasing lately seems to be more to do with like people contacting him rather than him actively seeking out the stories. So like if he is going back to seeking out the stories, then it's pretty scary days for a lot of the people that are, prone to the BS that we often see in esports.
But it's concerning of like if he's saying esports is at a critical time.
That's when
Dun,
you
dun,
know.
dun.
But I probably wouldn't. I didn't know he was retired till he made this post, because I most of the news esports journalist articles I read would probably Richard Lewis. Probably at least 50% of the esports article, maybe 50% is pushing it, but like a large majority
big
of esports
stories.
articles I read are from Richard Lewis, especially the big ones. The big ones is like mostly him and then like Cecilia nowadays.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Scary times if you've done anything you shouldn't have done, because the bloodhound's on the job yet again. So that could be a little bit of a worrying one for you. Hopefully you haven't done anything, I guess. So, good luck to Richard. I'm really interested to see what he does. Big fan of his work. Don't always agree with some of the things he says, but, he doesn't give a fuck about that, and I'm fine with that. So, unlike seemingly the hordes of people who shout at this dude on a daily basis on the internet, I don't think people realize how important what he does actually is to our space. You need somebody to actually look after the integrity of things and actually try to get to the truth of things, because let's face it, big companies, they want to make the money. They don't care about how the space is doing, how the ecosystem is. They don't even care about the people or the players or even about you. But there is somebody who actually does and is sort of a crusader for this, and the dude does receive a ton of hate for it. And well, I'm just surprised that he's gone back to it again. So I guess maybe he just has literal armadillo hide or something.
I think it's just a lot of time whenever somebody actually says something, and then yes, whether or not you agree with it, we've got this vibe in esports where it's always, in gaming, where if you don't support it fully, you must want to destroy it. I think we've been there.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Yeah, so yeah, props. Wait and see what it brings up.
Investigative journalism as a whole is like such an important thing, and Richard Lewis has been at the top of that game for like the last 15 years in esports. He's a legend, man. As Thorin calls himself, Richard Lewis is exactly the same thing. It's a fucking legend.
Yeah, absolutely, and the legend is on the job yet again. So on the job yet again is not something we can use to describe Astralis until this weekend coming up. They'll be playing at ECS, so the first big tournament they've played at that doesn't only include best of ones for a while. We've spoken about Refresh Entertainment and how they the Blast Pro series and their sort of soft exclusivity, which is it's fairly damaging to the scene at the moment. And so far what it's mostly damaged is the team that their own legacy as one of the greatest of all time, probably the greatest of all time. They've lost their number one spot on the HLTV rankings that they've held for a rather long time. Hey, Prof?
406 days.
406 days.
The longest number one ranking. So yeah, it's pretty devastating to say the least to Astralis fanboys.
Yeah, of which I and Shaun both own Astralis shirts. So.
I mean, I've got no sympathy for them. If they're not going to pitch up to events, then you can blame nobody but yourself.
Yeah, it's the only way you can protect your own.
To give you an indication, right? So, since they won the major at the end of February, Astralis has played 5 best of 3s. It's now June, so that's 4 months. The next lowest in the top 10, I think, is at 12 best of 3s played.
Wow.
You're physically just not even attending events anymore. So like, how do you? It's not even like, oh, like they're still the best in the world. It's like they've lost a lot. Like, no, they just haven't played. Like we literally do. You could be the worst team in the top 10 right now, and we don't know because you just don't play.
Yeah, it's a crazy situation. If anybody doesn't know, in the CS:GO landscape, the Blast Pro Series set of tournaments basically. They're best of ones. They take place over 2 days. This format is really, really garbage, basically. Sorry, you were going to say something?
No, it's basically just exhibitions.
Yeah, basically exhibitions.
The equivalent of like somebody skipping all the qualification tournaments before, like, say, Wimbledon, and only playing like an exhibition against, like some super low ranked players, like, once or twice, and then like going into Wimbledon and expecting to still have a high rank. It's like, no, people who play get a high rank.
Like just imagine Roger Federer in his prime was like, you know what? I've been number one for 406 days. Fuck it, let's go do some Nike adverts for a year. I don't need to practice anymore, right? It's basically the same thing.
The crazy thing is that they probably are still practicing because they seem to have that work ethic, but just because they're committed to Blast Pro Series, who's owned by Refresh Entertainment, who also owns them, supposedly they're a player-owned org, but yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I think it's also not good to look at it clear cut. Like when you look at the behind the scenes stuff, there's a lot of shit going on there that we probably don't know about yet. So that's fair, Axe.
Yeah, and you were mentioning as well, we saw that exchange between Sadokist and Sir Scoots over the weekend while Sadokist was actually casting the grand final of DreamHack Dallas. He was busy tweeting away, had his phone out there, and he's multitasking supreme. I didn't hear it in his voice, but some of those tweets were pretty angry. Where he had been saying a little bit earlier in the week that he'd spoken to a bunch of top players at tournaments over the last few months, and all of them that he'd spoken to had said that they don't like Blast Pro Series, they don't like the format, they don't like going to the tournaments, but they're not allowed to say anything in a public sense. And Sir Scoots sort of took issue with some of this because in the exchange it basically made it sound like the Players Association that he's involved with wasn't doing enough and that he's somehow culpable for it. So it just it was a silly argument, let's be honest. But it just shows you there's a lot of turmoil in the scene right now because of what this is creating. Because essentially these teams, I think it's 8 top teams in the world have signed on to be part of Blast Pro Series, which means that they have to play in 6 out of the 8 Blast tournaments, and that means that they skip other tournaments throughout the year. And why it matters for Astralis is because Astralis, being the most dominant team we've ever seen, you want to see how long can that go as a fan. You want to see the best quality Counter-Strike at every tournament. But you don't get to see that because they're locked in to go and play at a stupid tournament in Sao Paulo, as opposed to going to Starladder where, it has the best format in the game, basically, to determine you are definitively the best team at this tournament and therefore you deserve to win. No, they've got to play a bunch of best of one. So Counter-Strike fans is pissing everybody off at the moment. And now it's actually culminated in Team Liquid overtaking them. The team famous for not being able to beat Astralis have taken away their number 1 spot by not having to play against Astralis, which, it's just insane. You lost the Formula 1 World Championship because you decided to go rallying it within the same season. I don't know. It's just, what? So, Team Liquid, hey? The era is starting now, isn't it, Shaun?
Can I just mention one more thing about the Blast Pro Series thing, not Blastralis thing? So one of the, I don't know, Farouk Pita, one of the CSGO guys, says no one ever told us we aren't allowed to criticize Blast Pro Series. Like, the reason we don't is because there's nothing to criticize them about except for the format. Otherwise, Blast is miles ahead of all other tiers out there in all aspects. It looks like some of the CSGO, that's a CSGO pro, am I right in saying that?
Coach of NIP.
Oh, coach of NIP. So it seems like some CSGO people are happy with
Shaun.
that, but I don't know. Like, it seems like a really iffy situation because, like you said in the past, CSGO teams were not happy about having like one controlling, what's the word? Like
governing body or
one governing body that's not like the governing body. So it's like now it's like, okay, but Blast Pro are going to contract like 10 teams for like 12 events of the year, and it's just like, well, this is what we want to do. So again, I beg the question is like, how much money do you think Blast Pro are putting down for these guys? Like, maybe it's 5-star resorts all the time. Maybe it's first class flights for every event. I don't know. It just seems crazy. This whole situation is crazy to me.
So if they have them for like 12 events.
Well, that would be next year. This year, I don't think it's 12 events.
Yeah,
I think
for 12
it's 8.
events next
so
year.
do teams fall out, or do they just get new teams?
Every team that takes part basically signs a contract with them to agree to play a minimum number of the tournaments. So there isn't really qualification for it, except at some of them where they'll let like a local team like from Spain qualify for the tournament or something like that. But what it does is basically excludes a lot of guys who can't qualify for it. You have to be it's like franchising but pretending that it isn't, So
Yeah. I know.
So it's all kind of, and it wouldn't actually be so. Yeah, sorry.
And then I just want to say, couldn't also make that they have like their team and then a bunch of potatoes.
Conflict of interest,
Like-
yes, that's also an issue.
Exactly.
You know,
That's
and
exactly what
two
people are
other
worried
teams that
about.
might be competition, but essentially it's just their team on top all the time.
Yeah, and part of that as well is like what's been good for them so far is that with Astralis being so good, playing at the Blast tournaments, it's almost like they're the final boss. But since they've not been playing that much, they dropped off. They didn't make the final of one of the tournaments. They lost in the other one. So then it kind of takes the shine off the whole thing because now the final boss isn't so good anymore because they're playing this tournament. And also, you know what? If we need to promote somebody else and we can throw in a little bit of conflict of interest and manipulate the results, they could do that if they wanted to. They haven't. It doesn't seem like they have, but the fact that it's a possibility is something to be worried about.
It just seems like a bit of a waste. It's like when you have a pop star reaching like the end of their career and you put them out to pasture in like Las Vegas.
That's actually a really good way to put it. It's like they're Celine Dion right now, aren't they?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Hey. Oh well.
Well, they do add like shitty teams to the competition already. It's like what they've been doing. So,
and also it doesn't take into account like having signed up for it. For instance, ENCE was a surprise at the major, so now they should actually be at these events if it's supposed to be about the best teams in the world. But the guys that they signed at the time are no longer the best teams in the world. I mean, MIB are objectively crap now, but they signed up to all these events because they used to be one of the big teams. ENCE are now one of the big teams, but the only way they can get there is by being shoehorned in occasionally when they can fit them. So don't actually get a tournament with the best teams playing at it either because, of course, the landscape's always changing. You can't take the franchise approach to an esport that's as active as CSGO at this stage because that top 10 is always shuffling. That's silly. Anyway,
What we love about Counter-Strike and Dota is like you're always getting the new blood coming into the scene, open market,
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just bring up on screen quickly that article over on Upcomer. Team Liquid takes over #1 world rank after DreamHack Championships. You can see them there, all super happy about it, of course. And one of the reasons they're super happy in the screenshot or the photo is because they didn't have a photo of them with the trophy because the trophy got lost by the courier. So I think that is great, absolutely great. You can't script this stuff.
Isn't that the times you just send one of your guys out to China Mall to go buy some any shit?
no, they literally did give them just a shit trophy.
Like have it engraved at Boxels.
Yeah, well, now what it is they need to find the trophy wherever it went. Maybe the DreamHack Masters trophy is gone forever. Who knows? So, yeah, no worries there. I guess they won. They're probably more worried about winning than about getting a trophy. So let's move on. Actually, Prof, were you going to talk to us about Denial Esports?
I mean, basically just the news that they've decided to piece out of the scene, which was greeted by great rejoicing from just about everybody in esports because obviously the original organization was a piece of shit, and the new owners weren't much better. And obviously, we're all happy that they've decided to, piece out of our scene.
Absolutely. Sir Scoots' watch began and ended with the end of Denial. I thought that was really interesting. For about 2 weeks, he was posting on Twitter every day. And so my watch has begun. Denial Esports until you shut down shop and release all your players. And, like he listed all of the things. He's going to keep doing this. And he tagged them. They started blocking him and all sorts of things. And he just kept at it. And public pressure. It's not just him, of course, but certainly he's one of the more influential people in the scene. The public pressure has told.
But if you run it...
Can I go first, Nadia?
Yeah.
I just want to give context for those of you who don't know about Denial or know vaguely about them. They did things like they had young players playing that they were screwing over in contracts, not paying properly. They were reversing PayPal payments and transactions to some of their players, shady ass shit like that, while the owner of the thing was putting photos of his Bugattis and shit on Twitter. So it's mind-boggling how much fuckery was going on there with somebody who allegedly has so much money. So the fact that justice has been served feels good, man.
Now, what I was just going to say is what is the point of running something like that and influencing all the people's lives who are playing under you if that's the way that you're going to do it? obviously like until everything's been proven, you have to like allege. But I mean, if that was clearly what was happening, and to the point where you've actually shut it down, what's the bloody point? Is it just I want to be? Everybody wants to be like a team owner. Everybody
pretty
wants to be a
much.
brand, even in South Africa.
Or maybe if you're in that space in America, you put your name out, you got a shiny logo, a venture capitalist comes around and goes, "Ooh, esports! Well, this is making me feel some tingly sensations. $100 million, you know,
Can
that's
I
what you want,
introduce
right?"
to some Luno?
Yeah.
I mean, what did Niantic got intention to buy a slot for the COD World League?
They were aiming to, yeah. They were
Yeah.
trying to
Fucking
do so.
morons.
Okay,
guy
you
was
Can't
imagine-
pay
gonna-
your guys like $5,000 paycheck, but you want to buy. Oh,
He's
That's-
going to trade in his
I don't
Bugatti, hey? I mean, I'm not convinced that he had a
Seriously?
Bugatti because I don't think you know what those are worth, Kaameel. But
no, I do know what a Bugatti's worth. It was like, it wasn't like Ferraris or something. It wasn't a Bugatti, but Bugatti's just like the term. It's like in Dota when you have really good hats, we call them Bugattis. No
Jeez.
kappa.
can't get away from the Dota-isms with you. And I guess
Like, it was, I wouldn't say meme, but it was like, you know,
Yeah, it is a meme.
thing to say a couple of years.
Bugattis.
living in the past and living in Dota. Now, tell us about the present of Dota there, Kaameel.
Wow, it's much perkier on this side of the Dota world. So this is a story I've been wanting to talk about in the podcast for 2 weeks now. But luckily, I chose the time where Glenn's not here to flame Valve, so I can talk about it peacefully. So how the situation
No,
arose.
Kaameel, in League of Legends. Sorry.
That was
Sorry.
a great cosplay. That was amazing, Axe. That was amazing. So
Okay.
a situation in Dota arose with OG's star offlane player, well, debatable star offlane player, Sebastian fucking Mad, also known as Seb, in a ranked game playing, and he called a guy, or he got caught, screenshot and posted to Reddit, calling a guy, saying all Russians are whores who sell their mothers for MMR and that kind of stuff. All right, so that broke out and it was like big yikes. But how it happened was a guy on Reddit made this whole big post, but the guy, did I mess up my story yet? So the guy who made the post was a guy in that game playing with Shib. He was playing Storm Spirit, and he was like one of those guys who trying to make a pro rage so he could go make a post on Reddit and say, look at this guy, he's racist. So he did manage to make Sebastian tilt, and they were like fighting in the game and shit. And then Sebastian said that all Russians are whores who sell their mothers for MMR, third world dogs, that kind of thing. Really disgusting things. But in Sebastian's defense, obviously that guy was trying to make him rage and wanted to expose him for free karma on Reddit. And even the Reddit post itself was a bit shady with like people giving him gold at like 40 upvotes and like it's pretty stupid. But that's kind of misses the point because the whole plot thickened from there. Because his apology was like, yeah, I mean, we've seen this in South African esports recently. He's like, yeah, I'm sorry, my anger got the better of me, all that kind of stuff. But the issue was racism, right? And then you also have the issue that in the landscape of Dota 2, you had two issues of racism recently. With Skembelu and Cuckoo, we've just spoken about in the podcast. And both those players got caught using Chinese slur, Ching Chong, I think in less extreme ways than Seb said Russian MMR, whores, dogs, fuck your mothers, that kind of things. And they got banned from, one got kicked out of his team, another guy got dropped from an event, banned from the major. So in the Dota 2 landscape, it's like racism is now a thing people take seriously. It wasn't before that whole Cuckoo situation, but now it is. So the fact that the Seb thing got exposed, and he did apologize like super fast, but like it kind of missed the point that I think Scan tweeted about on like in Twitter, like after that, it's like it misses the point. You don't address the actual issue, which is racism. So the fact that it is racism, you see that the Russian community did feel quite strongly about this. Solo afterwards, VP's captain made a post saying that he refuses to go to the Epicenter Major, which is held in Russia, if nothing happens about Seb. So that sparked the whole outrage because like you had this, again, Scan tweeting saying like, maybe it's a bit opportunistic what Solo's doing, but it is kind of like you have to deal with the issue for what it is, racism. You can't ban one player and let another player say what he wants. And this started blowing up because VP's carry player also is like Ramsey 666 is also known to be quite a toxic player, and his chats are not the greatest thing either, and people are calling it out. So at some point, while all the stuff is escalating, a guy went and made he made a doc and he researched all the players' chat histories through software like OpenAI, etc. And he uploaded a doc. Like there's a GitHub with like so many pros chats, and they all say like really problematic shit. So when that hit the fan, Valve then did respond. They didn't respond directly, but they got Seb, Solo, and themselves in a room, and they said we're gonna deal with this. Valve they're gonna do something. So it's really good to see Valve are actually gonna do something. I assume they'll do a player conduct or something of the effect, but the crux of the story, I think, comes down to like you had a VP's offlane player also tweeted, we need to see consistency. I don't really give a fuck that people are saying bad things or people are not saying bad things, but you can't ruin one guy's career over a bad thing said and letting it go for another. Like, we need consistency. Be open with us. So hopefully that will happen with Valve with the alleged code of conduct thing. But I mean, the situation was serious and shit at the start, but like once that whole chat log came out, it was fucking hilarious, man. Anybody can go on Reddit, go find that GitHub post and read the kind of chat that happens in Dota 2. It's wild.
Yeah, I don't know. It's the problem is that, you know, like Valve specifically doesn't want to get involved, and they're like trying to be like, you know, we'll trust the community to like look after themselves, and then it's like, and then the community does things like that. So it's
Implode.
I don't know, like honestly, Dota just sometimes feels like Valve gives them way too much trust.
I think like how this all blew up is that like everybody knew people spoke like really disgusting in Dota, right? Racist things get said, sexist things get said, getting told, as Nadia said, to kill yourself is just part of esports. So it was never a surprise that the Dota community is toxic. But I think when the whole Cuckoo situation happened, it was he used a slur against the Chinese community. The Chinese community is probably the biggest part of the Dota 2 community and where Valve get most of their revenue from in terms of like people buying compendium hats, where tournaments happen, etc. So in that case, the Chinese community reacted strongly. They didn't take it lightly that people were dropping slurs under their Chinese name. You know, they're very patriotic. They're very strong about themselves and their culture. So they didn't take lightly to it, which is a good thing. You don't want to see racist terms being a regular thing. So in that case, they like Complexity, a very experienced org, dropped Skembelu when he said good luck, have fun, ching chong in the chat in a major. I don't think he even knew it was a slow or not. I don't know, but people went wild and he got punished. His org dropped him immediately and he's had struggles finding a team. And in the Cuckoo situation, he had on stream called one of the Chinese players or player who had Chinese characters like Ching Chong as well. And he got caught on stream saying that right after the Skembelu incident. So that blew up also. And all the Chinese community, like prominent members of the community were speaking to Valve directly. People were having ongoing dialogue saying, no, we don't accept this shit. So Valve, as well as having connection to TI9 in China, many, many connections in China, they had to respond, right? So eventually, after all that shit was blowing up, then they were like, listen here, we're gonna punish Cuckoo ourselves. We doing it. Look at us. We Valve doing it. We punishing him. And it's like, okay, you're doing that, great, Valve. But you haven't said anything for so long. Now you saying you doing it. And then Richard Lewis in the piece before Valve said they're doing something, said that he believes that it's the Chinese government forcing him, or there's a big influence from China saying that we're not going to accept this, like from the business guys, from a government point of view. And Valve denied those claims when they said, no, we banning Cuckoo ourselves. So we're like, okay, great. The Americans are all happy because Valve have the integrity of decide who gets to play and not. It's not just the Chinese government because, you know, for Americans, China is like a big issue. But then,
putting it mildly,
a 3 weeks or like maybe not even a month later, WASG, which was held in the same city where the third major or second major of the year was played, Chongqing, said Cuckoo can't enter the city. The municipal government said no, he's not permitted to enter the city. So now it's like, oh, Valve, you were in control, homie. Now this is why I think it's all escalated, because you can't have inconsistency. I don't mind them banning a player for racism or having a hefty penalty or something, but you can't be like, this guy said something to this group of people, and then this guy said something worse to another group of people, and you'd be like, but it's just the game, you know? Not that Valve have said that, but you have to respond. Valve have put themselves in a position where they can't use their usual response of, we don't care, you guys deal with it. If you guys really start hitting each other, we'll get involved, you know, but we relax parents. So I don't know, man. What do you guys think?
Whenever they have their hands on, I want to say like the control, then they should be the first persons to make those calls, which it feels like in this case they were kind of like not. And that's probably why everybody was upset in the first place. But that for me is just like for everybody. Like, if it would happen here and a player does something like that, then VS should be saying, this is our tournament. We don't want that to be associated with that. We don't want you playing in our tournament. Get lost. And if your team isn't going to replace you, then, they must not forfeit. That's what it boils down to at the end of the day. So whoever's in control is the person who needs to be making that call. And if they're not making that call, then that says a lot about them, and may they reap the benefits of it, not the benefits.
Well,
the opposite of benefits.
Valve are in the situation where they kind of have to now because they've set the precedent, as Kaameel was saying. But famously, they refused, also as you were saying, to actually get involved in that sort of thing. So now, my opinion on this, Kaameel, is that no matter what they say about the Chinese government not forcing them, and no, this was actually our decision, entirely unrelated. I call bullshit on that. Definitely what forced their hand. And because of that, that's just changed the whole paradigm with them. Now, in future, with every situation like this, the community will shout at them and force them to do it. So they've basically been backed into a corner by the Chinese government that they're going to have to live in for the entirety of this title's life.
And quite ironically, I think this is the greatest thing to ever happen to Dota, because like I felt when that whole cuckoo situation came out, I saw like the brunt of Reddit racism, right? Like every comment was like some derogatory term for the Chinese. Oh, the Chinese this, the Chinese that, and I was like, what the fuck, Reddit? Why are you guys being like this? This is you complaining about racism while being racist? Like what? But now it's a case of like, no, hold up, Seb. You can't talk shit about Russians when a guy got banned for saying shit about China. Fuck you. You must get in trouble as well. And I think that's progress, right? Obviously, it might not be for the rightest of reasons, but I feel like people are actually taking this shit seriously now. So I think Valve are in a position where they can be like, okay, we back, we in control, We've been thinking about this player conduct thing for years now. It's just waiting for the opportune moment to drop it. So I think that's probably what's going to happen. But clearly, if you see, like, let me just open the doc here and see how many names it is. It's a lot of names. It's like more than 20, 30 players, right? And if you have 20 players saying really bad shit, you can't take the same approach and be like, we're going to ban you from X event. We're going to ban you from X event, because then you'll have nobody at your fucking TI. So now they're in a position where they have to do something different. And I think like a player's code of conduct is like a good thing. Like from this day forth, if you say X thing in game, you're going to get this punishment, which is what Pasha asked for. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's like, there's a lot. It's a whole. Please just go look at the Reddit post. It's pretty. Yeah, you can learn some new slurs there as well if you're that kind of person.
If you want to identify some.
Well, I don't think you want to learn any new slurs, because as we've learned this very week, as we head over into the South African section of the show, that there are consequences for using those sorts of things in a local context as well. We had a couple of weeks ago, we spoke in very animated terms, but surprisingly civilly about the ACG situation, where his racism thing in Dota 2 in South Africa came out. He ended up being excluded from competition by Medal State, and then he voluntarily said in the last, about this time last week, Wednesday, that he's stepping away from all competition, even if he isn't banned from it, because it's the right thing to do. And yeah, we definitely agree with his approach. The way he seemed to say it and the way that he seemed to express his regrets, I think resonated with a lot of people, and people saw, it's always a thing when you put out a statement like that, oh, I'm really sorry for what I did. There's one of two ways it can come off, sincere or bullshit, and his came off as sincere. So, props to him. Not props to him for racism, props to him for taking it on the chin and accepting his punishment, and in this case, actually imposing more punishment on himself because he felt that it wasn't enough from their side. So great from him to see. Then we had the Muzzy situation that we spoke about last week, which we got a little bit more animated about, shall we say, because it's like, again, this is happening again.
Yeah.
Same
shit. And I think the Muzzy situation was also a bit different. Like the ACG one, I came out like a couple of days before the podcast. I had time to think about it before what I said. But I just see this Muzzy thing like 5 minutes before the podcast starts, and I'm like, you know what? Fuck this! Like a second incident, I was legitimately so mad in recording that last podcast. I slept like 3 that night because I was just fuming, man.
I think rightly so as well, because it's something that we keep talking about, and again, we've mentioned this a few times. Like, we'd stop talking about it if people would stop freaking doing it. So there would be that, but it's just again and again and again, and it just keeps happening. And the situation that basically transpired, I'll bring it up for you guys on screen quickly, but there was this article that our podcast mate Glenn actually released over on Critical Hit, the racist underbelly of local Dota exposed, in brackets again. That's unironically, but somehow ironic as well, just because it's again. So you can go over and read that as well. There's obviously there's a piece on Esports Central also by Chris House, just explaining some of the events as they unfolded on Wednesday last week. This article also came out on Wednesday and then was updated. Basically, the situation was an anonymous account exposed Muzzy for a racist incident, and from there it sort of escalated. Community people got involved. We were obviously pretty incensed by the whole thing. It ended with Goliath at the end deciding to well, we can actually bring this up on screen as well. The disciplinary action which GG took at the time was follows. Muzzy was provided with a final written warning, yada yada yada, and then at the end, it's updated that Goliath Gaming has made it clear that has made it clear that when they say GG management are taking the necessary steps with Muzzy, this is to say that Muzzy has been spoken to and dismissed with immediate effect. At the time, there was a little bit of disappointment from a lot of us about how they handled it on social media, because they said they first didn't know what was being spoken about or when it had happened, then somehow did know after being pointed out when it was, that no, we did actually punish him, which came across as, well, dubious at best, possibly even as outright lying. And maybe it was just that the person handling the social account didn't know this and was trying to cover or whatever. Whatever the case, it didn't go over well. A lot of us were just looking at going like, you can't say that you've punished this guy and like we should all pretend that it didn't happen and nothing to see here, folks. It's just how it came across. Maybe that was their intention, but the way it came across was not great. And that's why a lot of us were upset about the situation. The fact that they dismissed the player in the end, I'm not so sure that they might have done that had there not been so much pressure placed on them from the various media outlets, from this podcast, from people on Twitter.
Yeah, I at the time, again, when the whole situation happened, I was super pissed about it, right? I thought their response, I responded immediately. I thought it was disgusting, and I was really disappointed to see that kind of response. But it's like this is the thing with racism, right? It's not targeting an individual sort of thing. Like, people will say maybe I hate Muzzy or some shit. We had our beef in the past, but if everybody noticed, even in my rage rant last week, I never really mentioned Muzzy that much. It's like the actions and why they're problematic. I think GG as an org, it came off initially not understanding like why. It looked like to me they didn't understand what was the issue, right? But in the end, I think they did the right thing. They sacked the player. Obviously, maybe it didn't happen for completely the right reasons, but I feel like it's in the end it comes off looking like they did the thing that was necessary, right?
It's like a Val versus China situation.
Yeah, kind of like that. They were forced in a way, but at the same time, it's like look at GG's perspective, right? I know all the people in GG, like StGutterlily, one of the owners from GG. Like Muzzy and him have been mates for years. It's not an easy thing to go and sack your friend and shit. But it's not. We're not asking you to sack your friend. You need to just do the right thing from an org's perspective. And I think one thing I've been really disappointed about in this whole situation is we've still yet to see a response about VS Gaming about this whole thing. How can our largest governing body or TO in the form of VS Gaming say nothing? Like, how does it look when they're not saying anything about racism? They're the guys with the real power in hand, and that's again this is what comes down to racism. It's like, how do you have a system? You can either have a system that tolerates racism and inadvertently promotes it, or you have a system that looks to prevent it. Obviously, I'm not saying we have the cure for racism. This is people, much cleverer people than us, have been trying for hundreds of years in more serious situations. But in the context of esports, I think we can try at this point create a zero tolerance policy. And I think the fact that VS Gaming haven't said anything is a bit disappointing for me, Mr. Axtremes.
Yeah, totally agree with you on that one, man. Smaller TOs have come out like Metal State, and we saw Syntech Masters as well, saying that the players are not allowed in those tournaments. So, that good on them. But again, you do want the biggest, the very biggest body within the land to actually come out and say something. I saw some people tweeting at them. I know of some people have reached out to them, but I don't know if they're doing anything. I mean, things with VS do seem, for whatever reason, the gears seem to turn really slowly. So
yeah, I kind of get it as well. Like, sorry to cut you off there, Nadia, because it's VS Gaming, they're a big company. Their parent company is Telkom. Like, their response can't just be like some laxy daisy thing, right? The image for them is very important. So
They probably have to phone in and then hold the line for 15 minutes and then get to
brilliant.
Welcome to Telkom.
Metaphorically speaking, that's actually the best example you could have thought of, Nadia.
No, what I was just thinking is maybe I know, okay, everybody else is preventing it, but maybe their reaction would have been if it happened in one of their own games, then that is definitely covered by the code of conduct and you are booted.
Yeah, but it's just like
be proactive, I guess.
it's again the optics of the whole situation. Like you have Rob Hart making a joke. Like I think me and Cyprus I retweeted one of Sir Scoot's tweets that are like super relevant to all the stuff going on, and the only response I see from Rob Hart from the whole thing was like him joking about something in that thread, and I was like, it's not a good look, you know. Like I know you, Rob. I know you like done a lot for esports, and you think about this kind of shit and stuff, but like again, we still haven't seen a response from your org, and you as a person, and it's like making a joke about the thing, and I don't know if that's the look you want to see, especially like. Yes, there's 2 players who got caught now, but the issues of racism in South African Dota go far deeper, much deeper than people think.
And
Because, I mean, even the responses to that, and people actually saying, "Oh, but racism is not a problem," quote unquote, in South Africa.
oh my word, that.
In what world do you live where you can make that kind of statement? And then you have to keep in mind that kind of mindset, Steve Hofmeyerism, is among so many of us, and that's why this shit's going to keep on happening. It's going to keep on happening, and if the only way that you can, curb the enthusiasm for racism over here is to say, well, if you do it, you're out. That's it. Your job opportunities were already small. Now it's non-existent. Then let it be.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Back to Nadia's point, like there's actually a lot of people out there that think like that. It's a situation you have to accept. And I had a guy like when the Mazis thing came out, I was talking to like a couple of prominent members in the SA Dota community, like a team speak of 10 of us, and one of the guys is just like, he's like, I understand where you're coming from, mate, but who's really gonna give a fuck, right? If you look at the demographic in South African esports, it's like you're not really gonna get people who really care that much about the K-word, and I found it quite depressing then. But I think there's more people that care than we give credit for. Like, if we look at the response, like, I think us in the podcast group, we were, like, messing each other so much about all these things happening and, like, what we need to do and stuff. But we never had to do anything, really, after the whole Mazi incident happened because the community took care of it. There were so many people responding saying, we don't accept that shit. Do better. Why not do it like this? We don't accept that. Like, and I was actually chuffed to see that there's so many people taking the right form of action in this situation from my perspective.
I'll bring up one of the tweets that was in response to it. I was the only one who liked it, so apparently it wasn't very popular, but I enjoyed this. Captain Depression says, honestly, we don't have to pretend that players aren't racist pieces of shit, but you must be really fucking dumb to spew racist shit anywhere on any platform for whatever reason. I think that says it. Just don't say it, you dumbasses. Why are you saying it anywhere? You know that you will get wrecked for it if you put it out there. So don't.
It's like people trying to delete like stuff, like, oh, they've posted something on Twitter now, they quickly try to delete it. Like, no,
too late.
Like, the internet has everything. You ain't getting away with anything.
It's almost sad. Like, you can be a racist at home, just don't be racist online, because then you're going to be outed. So out them at every single chance that you get. Out them, because those people are the ones that are going to ultimately. No Tio is going to want to have people like that playing for them, or possibly saying shit like that under their banner. Right?
It's sad on the like basis of things. Like the reason we have to tell you not to be racist is going to hurt yourself. Hello, why can't being a good human being and having respect for people around you?
How about not hurting other people?
Exactly, not hurting a whole other group of people. And in South Africa, the majority group of people.
In a country that has a history of extreme racism, that it's institutionalized by the government and perpetrated against the majority of the company in a regime that was evil over a period of many, many years. It's just like, oh, and then people want to say that it doesn't exist. Like, do you live in another universe? Maybe the gated community that you live in the north of Joburg is another universe. But honestly, I mean, how freaking stupid you have to be to pretend that that doesn't exist. And it almost felt to me like some of the things that are coming out are like apologists for like what's being said, and it's just maybe that's not the intention, but that's how you come off.
How do you want to grow the scene when you are perpetuating hate like that? It just doesn't work. And I think, again, it's a systematic thing. MGOs need to start saying, listen, guys, you can't be caught being racist in my team because that's unacceptable. Again, it's maybe an artificial change. You're making people be decent for own vested interest, but fuck it, if nothing else works, that's what you have to do.
It also does sound like one of those things that's kind of common sense, like don't be a piece of shit human, but you have to be told not to be a piece of shit human, which is crazy, but it is what it is. Lastly on this, I'll just also reference Muzzy came out with a twit longer explaining his his feelings on the whole thing and how very sorry he was, and it's now gone, sadly. We do have a screenshot buried away somewhere, but we can't reference it now. So what I will say on it is the general feeling that I got from some of the people that I spoke to, and I mean, we also spoke about it privately, came across a little bit more like I'm really sorry I got caught as opposed to I'm sorry for what I did. My career's ruined, poor me. And I get why he would feel that way, but take what we just mentioned, ACG's way of talking about it. It came across a lot better, and maybe he needed somebody to help him write it or whatever. But even in it, he references his incident of racism when in fact what we've got is 3 separate incidents of racism against 3 different people groups over a period of 7 days, whereas he said he was having a bad day, which kind of those 2 things don't mesh at all. So it just came across as insincere. Sadly, I wish it hadn't, but it did.
Yeah, and it's like if you Muzzy, right? I'm reading this thing and I was like, and I was just face palming the whole way.
I think we have to say at this point that if next week we end up not speaking about racism, it'll be a relief, because it's just
Jesus, I'm so done, dude.
Yeah, please stop, guys. Please stop being assholes.
And the thing is, it's not like we even like experts or anything on that on this podcast, right? You have like really smart intellectuals that really dive into racism, especially within the South African context. But the fact is, we have to sit here and be spokespersons because this is the shit in our face all the time for the past 3 weeks. So what can we do?
I do feel like, whenever you say like somebody's apology sounded good and stuff, we can't say that. We, as white people,
exactly,
it's not as, the word doesn't weigh as heavily. We know it's bad and we know not to say it, and you don't use it against people and things like that. But we can't forgive you. And the only way that you can improve yourself is for people that you are insulting using these slurs, and to who it would have been made applicable, to actually consider what you're saying. So I almost feel like, good on you if you think you're doing what needs to be done, but it's never a case of forgiveness. It's the fact that you need to change as a human being, ultimately at the end of the day.
And on to Nadia's point, like the difference between like South Africa and like what happened with Skembelu and Cuckoo last year is that the Chinese community have such a big voice within the scene, right? They have a place where they can say, no, we don't accept this. They can stand up for their own rights. In South African Dota, it is a very unfortunate fact that we don't have that many like African people playing. So you don't have the black voice within South African Dota. Like you have myself who's Indian, you have like Snare and talent-wise, and there's like a couple of guys you see on his Facebook groups and stuff, but like the majority isn't. So it's like not like even you can have the people themselves standing up for themselves, because I understand now why they don't play the game in the first place, because there's so much bullshit that goes on. So you actually need the governing bodies like the VS Gamings, like the Medal States to actually say, look, this is wrong. Then you can actually create a system where those people then actually want to play the games, So it's like you have to think about things holistically. Me of
something now. What's that? The team from Soweto?
Ikasi.
Like when they did that exhibition game, I remember, was it against
Goliath?
Or it was. And I just remember reading the comments that were being made on like the YouTube stream. It pissed me off so much. Like how people were talking about that team. Not necessarily like clear out blatant racism, but demeaning and
yes.
So no shit, Sherlock. Maybe people don't want to get involved because get into that, and that's what you're being met with. This actually just reminded me of that, and I actually wish I had screenshots back then. But it was also people who actually had accounts, and it's like a new account made so they can sit there and type these vile shit and let it loose into the public. with no consequences.
It's better for you. It's better for everyone. If you stop being a piece of shit, you accept where you live and actually just start loving people, guys. Because, I mean, we're all just people. We don't need to be pieces of shit to each other. Please don't.
And basically, if you're white, stand up to this shit.
Yeah.
You've got a voice still in that aspect. You should be standing up for that. And I know people are doing it maybe because they don't like teams or they don't like players. Maybe come from a different space in your heart and just stand up to this shit. And when the person says it in the game, knock them there and then. Just kill it right there. But I guess this way is also working right now. Same result.
Okay, so we'll put a full stop under that. I think let's hope that we don't talk about this again for a long time. We've had 3 very different discussions about this sort of thing, actually, which is interesting. We've had the very reasonable intellectual discussion. We've had the all-out anger, and this one feels a little bit more conciliatory. Like, please stop being a piece of shit. So,
yes, dude, at that point we're begging with racist.
Yeah, okay, well,
Please don't be a piece of shit, please.
just please don't. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Let's hope that we're done talking about this for a while. We've got a couple more things we need to hit. We may only actually hit on one of them, I think, based on the time that we have left, and it's probably the biggest news in local esports this week. Shaun, tell us about Energy.
Yeah, so we were obviously graced with the first ever opportunity recently to qualify for a CSGO major. That will be the Berlin major at the end of, I think it's end of August. I think it's in August, if I remember correctly. Either way, regardless, run by StarLadder, they decided to give South Africa their first shot at a major. And, we were all like super stoked because we've never had the qualification opportunity. We'll be going through the Asia Minor and kicked off last week. And, I mean, Goliath Gaming tore through the opposition, basically beating everybody 2-0 on the way to the final. And Energy Esports, not the same Energy Esports, the all-conquering Energy Esports of last year and late 2017, they got knocked into the losers bracket, ended up having to beat, if I remember correctly, I think they had to beat Big 5, Sin 5, and then eventually Goliath. Not all in the same day, but it was damn close to how far they actually had to push themselves, and ended up beating Goliath in the final 2-1 to become the first ever team qualifying from South Africa to the
Asia Minor.
To the major. I mean,
The minor.
Sorry. To the minor. Obviously, we've had other teams that went through other methods, notably Bravado Gaming last year. But I think it's fantastic to see the opportunities that we've gotten, and best of luck to Energy.
Yeah, certainly. And as you mentioned, they had to go through probably the most legit run possible. We're talking about a team that's brand new. Only one player left over from the Energy Academy side that unexpectedly won VS Gaming Masters at Comic-Con. Just Dweezil left over. So you can't even say it's like the core of a team and they're strong and they're building. It's like all young players. There's Mr. who was in Energy for the better part of last year. You have a couple other guys that are a little bit lesser known, but it's young players. These are young guys. They managed to come and beat all of these teams with the legendary names, the guys who've been around in the scene for a long time. They beat the top 3 teams in the country in the same competition. So you can't shake a stick at the results. You can't go like, oh, it was a fluke or this or that. They lost to Goliath in the upper bracket final, went down to the lower bracket, beat Sinister 5 and went back to the grand final. In the second try, they beat Goliath, who hadn't lost a map in the entire tournament. So I mean, from that, you can't dispute the result. You can't go and say, oh, it's because of this or that, or we had a bad day or whatever. They had to beat everybody who is anybody to actually get there. It's a young team. And what I'm excited about with this team is because it's a young team, they've got room to grow. They can get better. I still don't think they're the best team right now in South Africa, but they did beat all the best teams, so they're well on their way to becoming that. And I mean, if you look at all the other teams, Shaun, I just feel like they're filled with journeymen, that players, that have been around for a few years. I don't think in a lot of cases those guys are necessarily going to get much better, whereas these guys, this is a group of young players, they can only get better from you.
Yeah, I do agree with you there. I think a couple of the teams you can't really look at them and say like I can expect them to get better in the next in the near future. Whereas Energy can reasonably still improve. I don't know how much, but they don't look like they've tapped out all the potential, which a couple of other teams look like.
Yeah, absolutely. So exciting news there. They'll be at the Asia Minor at the end of July, so they got some time to prepare, build up their map pool, because that was one of their notable weaknesses so far in the tournament. So let's hope to see that come through. And I'm just super excited. South African team on the international stage, and with the possibility of making it through the Asia Minor to actually get into the major. And the way it works these days is the minor is held the week before the major actually starts. So it's at the same venue in the same studios and everything. And, you're going to get that experience, which for a group of young players is going to be invaluable. We talk about WESG and the MSSA things and all the other things, but this is the biggest stage that you can be on, barring, obviously there isn't a crowd or anything, but metaphorical stage that you could be on in Counter-Strike. So I'm super, super stoked for the guys. Unbelievable result. And, whoever was going, we were going to support. But, the Energy storyline, it's just it seems like teams with the name Energy on the tin seem to deliver the storylines in South Africa.
Oh, well, I mean, who would have thought that, basically a combination of the two previous Energy lineups, because they obviously had two different squads last year. Running at the same time, that like they sort of had to break, both of them broke apart, and then they cobbled together a couple of the players, got a couple of others, and still winning. So clearly something with that org knows how to throw teams together that are effective in competition at the moment.
And Energy yet to lose to anybody in playoffs in quite a while. It seems it doesn't matter who's in the team.
Yeah, I don't know. They seem to have some great luck as that Energy team. Because every competition they've entered, barring one last year when Bravado came back and thumped them pretty effectively. Every competition barring that, they've won. So
yeah, indeed. Well, I made a bet with Hayes when we were doing an ESEA broadcast. He asked me, what do I think's going to happen at the qualifiers? And I said, no matter what happens, Goliath Gaming are definitely coming second, which sounded like a horrible thing to say, but it's just the history bears it out. It's like the poor guys just fell at the final hurdle, unfortunately for them. And it's just, I thought it would be at the hands of Big Five or Sinister Five, and instead the thing that probably shouldn't have happened, but did happen. Energy, legit result. The youngsters are going, support them, guys. Absolutely get behind them. I think the whole of South Africa will be behind them. Who knows about esports?
Even the Goliath Gaming Dota team have the second place record. I think last year the Dota team finished twice, either 2 or 3 times. It's like crazy.
Yeah, they need to win something sometime, eh? I'm sure they'll get over the hurdle eventually, but it's crazy how that keeps happening to that org. Anyway, I think that is our show. Sorry?
I want to say, hopefully by next week I can say something along the lines of, and guess what? South African Overwatch.
They came second in the middle state Overwatch thing also.
Yeah, Energy won the middle state Overwatch, didn't they?
Energy wins, don't worry. I'm just
They
thinking
FIFA
about...
players. They FIFA players win. Sorry, Nadia, I just had to find something.
No. I was just thinking like, we've got the Overwatch World Cup coming up. What's that going to look like?
Well, I think that is our show, guys. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate you guys being here. Appreciate you sticking it out for 45 episodes. We actually got messages recently on Facebook from a dude who told me he'd listened from the first episode and has listened to everyone. And I'm like, internally, like, geez, you're crazy. Some of those were shit. But, I didn't say that. I said thank you. And to you, sir, thank you for listening through all of it. We really appreciate it. And we appreciate all of you listening to it and getting involved in the South African and international esports scene and listening to what we got to say. Because, without you, we wouldn't be doing the show. So thanks, guys. 50 coming up pretty soon, episode 50. We're going to try and do something special for that, so do look out for that in the coming month and a half or so until it actually happens. In the meantime, follow us on Facebook and Twitter and all the platforms, Instagram. Kaameel posts pictures of himself with his mom, so definitely go check that out on Instagram. No, he's not on Instagram, but yeah.
I'm going to go look now.
I wanted to debate that out, see if people would go and look.
Millennials that doesn't have an Instagram account. Or Gen Z, so I don't know what generation I am in, but just fuck it. Fuck Instagram.
But if you do want to follow Esports Central, go to the website, esportscentral.co.za, or find us on all the platforms that matter. We'll be back next week. I think it is the 13th of June with episode 46. Look out for that, guys. Cheers.